Forbes Books presents Leading What Matters Most, the podcast that helps you change behaviors, improve performance, and unlock the potential of your people. Here's Phil Geldart.
My guest this week is Dr. Christopher Bray. Chris is the founder of the Adaption Institute, where he and his team of experts equip organizations with science-based solutions for peak performance and change management. He's a leading researcher and speaker in the field of cognitive behavioral science and human potential, which is what we're going to chat a lot about today. Dr. Bray's written best-selling books, including The Best Job Ever, and has led cultural change initiatives for top corporations. So, Chris, we are really thrilled to have you today. So thanks a lot.
You bet. It's good to be here.
So one of the things, Chris, I would really like to get started with is I really believe that there's tremendous potential in every human being, and that leaders have the obligation to try to release that. But it's not easy. And I know you've done a lot of research here. I'd love to hear your thinking about why is that hard and what can leaders do in order to actually harness the potential of the workforce?
There goes 2 hours right there, Phil.
That's right. We're off and running.
In the workplace and in large and small organizations, we seem to think that if we just tell someone that they need to change or they need to do something or work harder, be more engaged, that they're going to listen and that they're automatically going to make that change or adapt to the feedback or the coaching. But when it comes to human potential, it is one of the most personal aspects of being able to change and develop. And in fact, when you think of human potential, it really is about the individual's capacity for growth and development and achievement. And I loved how you said at the beginning, it's almost that self-efficacy where people believe I can do something that I used to think that I couldn't do. Like I now know that not only can I do something, but I can be really good at it and I can stand out. But there are a lot of things that seem to get in the way of our human potential. It's not just through leaders coaching and doing things, but it's the personal decision that people make that unlock that human potential in the brain that then helps them take steps forward to learn and to develop. And then most importantly, just to try.
So talk to us a little bit about what it is that I have to do myself internally if I want to really see my potential released, and then the role of the leader. Because you had chatted earlier about the fact that it's actually, it begins from the outside and then it kind of gets responded to from the inside. So elaborate a little bit on that for us.
Sure. And why don't we start internal? When we look at internally, really it's helping the individual become aware. It's just opening up their awareness through insights, through those aha moments that they can see something they couldn't before. So their perception changes. Now, let me jump out for a second. When we look at the role of the leader really is to provide and encourage those insights, to awaken something in that individual's mind to change, to develop and adapt. Because we do know that no one changes and no one develops. I mean, I've been married for 30 years and my wife has tried to change me for a lot of years.
Yep.
It isn't until I make that decision that I'm actually going to change. And a lot of people know this. It's called neuroplasticity, but it's much bigger than that. Because when we look at neuroplasticity, it's all about thinking differently than we did before, learning new things that we didn't before, adapting and behaving ways that we didn't before. And one of the best parts of neuroplasticity we never talk about is it helps us forget when we failed, those painful experiences. So it really is neuroplasticity jumping in where we're learning, we're behaving, and we're changing in ways that we haven't before. And it really all comes down to changing that personal perception. And that's something internal. So, when organizations roll out new processes, when you get a new leader, when you get new products or clients, a lot of times what's the first thing we do? We think of, oh no, what is going to go wrong? I had all these great clients, now I don't. I was an expert in this process, now I'm not. Same thing goes for products. But then as individuals start to learn and try, and they bump into some challenges, that's when that neuroplasticity kicks in and the learning and development occur that people all of a sudden get a taste of success, get a taste of, wait, I can possibly do this. When that happens, people believe then that they can change. And for some individuals, that adaptation or that change or that awareness can come really quickly. It could be one experience. It could be some positive experience with a leader or with a counterpart who notices, hey, you're doing this much better. They weren't aware of that, the individual. And now this new awareness, this new perception opens up in the brain. They have the success. And one of my favorite drugs ever, dopamine, then starts to kick in. And dopamine is that neurotransmitter that really then jumps into, hey, I could do more. I want to do more. I can be successful with this. It's the get up and go, chemical in our brain that gets us to do more when we've been successful.
So you've just opened up 3 paths in my mind that I want to chat through. Let's see if I can grab these. The first is, if I'm just at work, or it could be at home or wherever, but if I'm just doing my thing and someone doesn't come along and trigger that, am I then far less likely to realize that that potential is within me? Is that what you're saying, that it's really a matter of there's a huge impact when someone comes and encourages me to reach beyond myself or to do more? It's not just something I have to do by mentally thinking, well, I can be better?
That's a really good question, because something external, especially an individual, just mentions something, coaches us, gives us praise, or, hey, you're achieving, you're doing great. It could be that, but it could also be something individual. And let me give you an example. It could be such that the individual looks at their life, maybe they're just a little bit sad, things aren't going well. There was a failure or a challenge that they didn't rise up to, or, they weren't able to complete. And then all of a sudden they start to self-evaluate and start to look and have that self-perception of, okay, who am I? What am I doing? Wait a second. This is the life, or this is the, this is the work, or this is the person that I don't want to be, and I need to change. And so they can have that self-realization that I absolutely need to change. And then it's that inward motivation to change and to adapt and to start doing things different. It's almost like this self-awareness wakes up and we see ourselves as we really are.
In your experience, is it 50-50, or is it much harder to come to the self-awareness? That would seem to me to be a more difficult thing.
It's much harder, to come to ourselves. It is so much harder versus someone coming to you, because even though a lot of times we know that when leaders coach or give feedback, that the individual already puts it through this sieve, already says, no, that's not true. I don't believe that. Or maybe in some ways it's true, but they stop and they do a little self-reflection, because they're thinking, is what that individual said correct, or is it not correct? Whereas when it's just you as an individual, sometimes we need that wake up moment. I always say, when life just punches you in the face and you don't realize it, that those evaluation, self-reflective moments happen, and you realize, I absolutely have to change.
Very cool. I keep wanting to jump to my third point, but I'm going to pause for a minute. Let me go back to my second point. One of the things that we often hear is, I had a really bad experience at school. My teacher told me I was terrible at math. My teacher told me I would never be a writer. And that seems, at least anecdotally, to be a very negative influence on people's growth. If early on they're told they can't, which sounds like the flip side of what you're talking about. So just talk a little bit about that. How is the negative? Is it as powerful as the positive? Is it more or less?
It's much more powerful. Think about this, and there's lots of examples. Someone can compliment you 10, 15 times in a day as you're going throughout the workday. And if one person says, oh, you sure screwed up that presentation, you didn't hit that one point that we really wanted you to hit with that client, what do we go home and think about? We think about the negative over and over again. Now, there's a genetic, I think it's important we talk about, there's a genetic component. We know that resilience and the ability to be resilient and thrive through challenges and failures and hard times is about 40% genetic. So you have a 60% variance there that is all to you. So that's why some children, adults can, are resilient, much more resilient, and bounce back. I mean, my wife is absolutely, I'd say 90% genetic resilience. She just bounces back so well. I would say I'm a little bit lower. You say something to me in negative, and boy, I'm going to think about it and analyze it for the next 2 days. So there's the genetic component, but the negative really seems to resonate with us. Now, especially, remember, as our brains are forming up until the age about 23, 24, for some reason, those negatives that are said then create a lot of emotions, which then seal it in the brain. And so that's why oftentimes we carry things that happened to us in childhood, or we carry thoughts that someone said something to us. We carry throughout our life. I'll never forget in my junior year of high school, my humanities teacher, I did this report and I worked so hard on it, and it was on a country and we had to do it. And I took it in, and I remember her pulling me aside after class and said, this was really a terrible report. And she said, Chris, I'm glad you have such a big personality. I'm so glad you're friendly, because really brains kind of not your thing. So now It's like I have 2 PhDs. Honestly, I think that comment for years just drove me to be like, oh, you don't think I'm smart? I now have an MBA, a PhD. I just got a second PhD because it was such a hurtful, emotional moment.
This whole conversation plays into a deep conviction I have that who we work for makes a monumental difference. One of the things that when we do the leadership training at Eagles Flight, we go through an activity where we say, think of the best leader you've ever worked for and think of the worst leader, and then compare your performance. And inevitably people go, well, I was a way better person working for a good leader than a bad leader, but they're the same person. They bring the same commitment to the job every day, but the quality of the leader make a huge, because that great leader is doing exactly what you said. They're encouraging them. They're encouraging them to stretch. They're giving them an opportunity to be more than they thought they could be. So it really reinforces the fact that leaders in today's world have a tremendous responsibility if we're actually going to get at the potential in the workforce.
Oh, I totally agree, because like you said, it's about trust. When we look at people who perform the highest in the workplace, exceed performance, unlock their potential, it's leaders who both, as you said, praise, encourage, hey, you're doing a great job. But when something goes wrong, they provide pure, honest feedback so that they know both ways, whether it be encouragement or some feedback and development discussions, that they're getting 100% honesty. And the key point, though, is that leader, from what a lot of people said, I think one person said it perfectly, the leader has my back. They want me to develop. They want me to be better. And because of that, I'm going to do everything I can to make them happy.
So I want to go back to my third point that you, way back in a way, this idea of I have to see for myself. I have to come to a conviction within my own mind about the value of getting better, whether it's because I do some self-reflection or I'm challenged by a leader, really plays into the concept of experiential learning. As you know, Eagles Flight's a big experiential learning company. So one of the things which we try to do is put people through an activity where they can self-reflect and build conviction about the need to change, so that it's more than just a realization, there's actually a conviction. So can you talk a little bit about what's going on in the mind of people as they move from an awareness of a need to change to then the conviction, which then hopefully leads them to the change itself? Because there's got to be a little more than everybody wants to be like, oh, I'd like to be fitter, but I really like this show a whole lot better. My ice cream is good. So they sit on the couch. So you've got this desire, but not the real conviction that you need.
Oh, absolutely. And I do have to say, having been in some of those sessions, that your company just does that better than anybody else that I've seen, because it's not just a fun learning activity or fun learning experience. It's one that, as you said, changes how people think. And I think there are two things that you do really, really well and that cause that change and cause that, for lack of a better term, it's almost like this brain bomb that goes off 24, 48 hours later saying, I think that they're right. I think that I can do this and I want to change. And one of those things has to do with attention. Now, a lot of people will say, and we ask this all the time, are you aware? How aware would you say you are? And we know that most people are not even probably 50% aware of what's going on around them. Now, a really fun, and let me throw this in, one of my favorite research studies was around an individual who took some individuals at Harvard, and they would go up to an individual on the Harvard campus and ask them, hey, where is this building? I need to find it. And in the middle of that discussion, now remember, they're 3 or 4 feet away in person. And in the middle of this discussion, this big board just comes right in between them. Some people carrying a board comes right in between them. And behind the board is another person that switches with the original person who was asking the question. Literally, I think it was 6 out of 10 in the initial study. It's been replicated numerous times. Notice that the person was different. So they've been talking for a minute or two. And it's at totally different. So we're not aware. I mean, and there are other fun things.
Unbelievable.
I know that researcher did. But what you do so well is that you bring awareness and you bring attention, because what happens, and this is one of the major things, is when you bring attention, almost that cone of attention, it creates a barrier for the noise in our lives. So when they have that experiential moment or experiential learning, journey with you, what happens is you cancel out the noise, so the signal is much louder. of this is what it can be if you change. This is a different way to think. This is a different perception. And they do it in a way that's enjoyable and fun. So we're releasing all the right chemicals in our brain. And when you mix the attention, the louder message or the signals there to drown out all the noise of their daily life, to not have to recognize what they may need to recognize, i.e., I'm not as healthy as I can be. My behavior at work is not good. Maybe I don't communicate as good or as well as I should. Then all of a sudden that signal's loud and they say, wait, I may need to change. And then what's great about it is right after that experience, then they debrief it and start to learn the tools to do it. So you're providing this cascade of events that gives them the awareness, the attention, the desire to change, and all of a sudden here are your tools, which, in life, we don't get it in a package like that often.
So one of the things, Chris, that I've been chatting with a number of people about is the wide array of folks now coming in the workplace. So you've got the very young, the Gen Zs, they're coming in, and you've got folks that are near retirement. So how does some of the things that we're talking about impact on those various generations? Is it something we got to pay attention to, or is it common for everybody?
Oh, I love this topic. It is really interesting that when we go to different organizations or when we speak to different researchers, that we find a lot of people see all this as, well, there's a lot of negatives. This generation is like this. They don't want to work as hard. They want to get promoted faster. They love their time off, or they're so dedicated to their work. But what I see is I see benefits in every generation that the other generations could look at. I'll admit, hopefully I don't look it, but I'm 53 years old. And so I'm not that great sometimes at technology. I mean, I can think, I can turn off the noise. I mean, I'm good at a lot of things, but I love it because oftentimes in the organization, I'll go hand my phone and say, I cannot figure out how to do this. And I'll go to a brilliant 26-year-old who's like, okay, Dr. Bray, just give it to me. And I love them because 2 minutes later, it's all done and it's exactly right. So there are a lot of benefits, but we have to be aware of both sides of that coin. What are the benefits that they offer? But then also, what are our perceived negatives? But I will tell you, a lot of individuals my age look at people in their 20s and 30s and say they have it right because they're really having a balance in their lives between work and personal. They're enjoying their hobbies and they're saying, no, I don't want to make more money. I want to go out and play pickleball or frisbee golf, or, I want to go and listen to concert or practice my guitar. And so they really have this great balance that some of the, more mature generations are saying, oh, I worked 15, 16 hours a day for decades. And now I'm looking back saying, maybe I missed out on a couple things.
Fascinating. So if I'm a leader, how do I reflect that in my behaviors with these various age groups and different priorities? And it's interesting you mentioned that. Someone was just chatting to me recently that it's less about sort of work and family balance now. It's more about work and life balance. They're reaching out beyond just, okay, I got to have time for my family. They're now saying I need to have time for myself. So again, as a leader, is there anything I should be doing differently, or is it sufficient just to be aware of this?
Oh, no. Leaders play such a strong role in having a team. And most teams now we know exist, 3-4 generations that they're having to, which you have to lead them in, very, very different ways. And I think one thing the leader has to do is first start with themselves, see if there's any unconscious bias towards their own generation, which we all perceive. Now, I grew up in the 80s. I think the music in the 80s was the best. The cars in the 80s were best. The toys in the 80s. I mean, everything that I could think of, I think the 80s is the best. And sometimes I think, the people who are in their 20s, what a hard time to grow up. So the leader needs to just evaluate, self-reflect on their unconscious bias. Are they more biased towards one than the other? But I think one of the key things that leaders can do is bring out the best in each generation and have those discussions and have those opportunities for one to help the other. And, instead of you having to figure out, take all the time, why don't you go ask this individual? And they're really good at it. Or ask this individual. They have all the institutional knowledge. They've been here for 20, 30 years or have been in this, this work area, for 20, 30 years. They can provide you a lot of perspective. So it's the leader who opens up that communication, but also sends a message of inclusion. Hey, everybody has something to offer. And sometimes I think that we're not as different as sometimes the researcher, when we look at different demographics, we're not as different as they say we are. And it's sometimes polarizing versus there's so much that we can offer each other, especially now, as you know, we're collaborating more than ever. you all of a sudden have all these gifts and talents, just diverse throughout that different project that can really help make it successful.
As we're talking, I'm thinking about the listener who's maybe thinking to themselves, boy, this is information I've just never been aware of. I see my job as I go to work, I'm the leader, I tell them what to do, I give them feedback, I try to be nice about it, and I move on. And now we're talking about, gee, I control the impact that I can have is huge if I begin to rethink about the paradigm, the way I consider my work. And I think it must be awfully difficult for leaders, even if they want to change, because if they don't have a great leader, how do they get from, okay, I would really like to be that kind of a leader, but how do I get there? I mean, they can always take an Eagles flight training course, that I get, and that's an important component, but it's more, how should I be thinking about this? What can I be doing to help translate from this new realization to my day-to-day workplace when I just do not have a role model that I can copy from. And it's so tough.
It is so tough. Everything you just said has been going on for generations, for decades. We've had, the message of leaders are mostly focused on helping develop us for productivity, for performance, for development, promotion, sometimes all of those different P's of the workplace. Whereas now we know, with all the research in the brain and cognitive psychology, that it's about connection, that it's about helping that individual, like you said, help develop their human potential, but also have a relationship that we're open to have open discussions, that I'm open to your feedback, that I'm open to your coaching, but also that trusted relationship that I know that you help make me a better person as a whole, in every aspect of my life, whether that be personal or whether it be professional. So it is a much different type of role. I don't even want to say job role that leaders have to take on. And it's much more difficult. And there aren't a lot of good examples of people who play the role of, hey, we are focused on performance and potential and doing the very best we can do. But I'm also really interested in you as an individual and developing you in ways that you feel like you need help and in ways that I see that you could develop would make you overall a great person. Maybe that could mean communication. Maybe that could mean presenting, how you present yourself. It could mean the way even that your behavior is in the workplace, because we know that then weaves all into their personal life. If they can't communicate at the workplace, I'm telling you, their relationship is going to be exactly
they're toast. Yeah, you're right, Chris. Okay, let's hang on. We have to take a quick break, but coming up next time with cognitive behavioral researcher Dr. Christopher Bray, the founder of the Adaption Institute, Chris is going to talk with us about how the smallest interactions with leaders can have the biggest impact.
It's those moments that the leader isn't in a leader position, that they're walking somewhere, or then the meeting and they go up to someone they normally wouldn't go up to and shake their hand and say, it's good to see you. Hey, I heard you did this. Boy, people remember it for decades.
This has been Leading What Matters Most with Phil Geldart. If you want to create a culture that drives performance and develop leaders that inspire and motivate, go to philgeldart.com. Leading What Matters Most is a production of Forbes Books.